Thank you. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Tous les tests de son ont été faits.
All tests have taken place.
A video conference this morning in accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses. I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. For the benefit of members and witnesses, wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And a reminder, all comments are to be addressed through the chair.
We can do that at the end if you wish. We can do that at the end.
For the benefit of any new witnesses, for the benefit of any new members that are attending this morning, welcome to our meeting. And for the benefit of our witnesses as well, I will use this screen where that will tell you you've got 30 seconds left, and when the time is up, I will gently pull this up, and I might give you a couple of seconds extra to wrap up. Otherwise, I will need to interrupt you, so don't take it personally. That's just how things are done in these committees. So what we will do this morning is one panel and until 11 o'clock. Sorry, it's 11, so until 1 o'clock. So we will have one panel. All witnesses are appearing by video conference, and they're all going to be on the same panel. I've been given the names of members that will be asking questions, and what I will do is I will start with...
Madame la Présidente.
Oui, Monsieur.
Madam Chair, just a point of order, please. You said that there's going to be one panel this morning. Now, usually there are two, and there's sort of a bit of a reset after 1 hour. And so by the time the second panel comes, there's 666 again, and we have time to decide on our questions. So how will you manage the time so that we don't have 2 hours and only 2 minutes for myself and Mr. Garrison? We will keep the same order and the same number of minutes, but I do have to respect the time. Thank you.
So, à titre personnel, Omar Babili, étudiant, student. We have Ali Islam, as well in personal name, representing Centre Islamique et Services Communautaires de Toronto, Director General Shafni Nalir, and representing the Youth Coalition Combating Islamophobia, we have Mariam Al-Sabawi, Dareen Shilbayi, and Hamza Omar. So I will begin with the first that I have on my list here for 5 minutes, please, and I will ask Omar Babili to please start.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I am an immigrant settler living, studying, and playing on unceded land of Lekwungen, Songhees, and Squamish, peoples whose historical relationship with this land continue to this day. Good morning, Madam Chair and honorable members. Thank you for the invitation to appear before this committee to share my experience and perspective on this committee's study of Islamophobia. My name is Omar Babili. I am 25 years old and currently studying civil engineering at the University of Victoria. My first encounter with Islamophobia was in 2017, Bellevue, Washington, the Islamic Center of East Side, a place of worship and community for many Muslims. It was burned down in an act of arson. This incident deeply affected me as I was attending Bellevue College at that time. The destruction of our Islamic Center was a stark reminder of hatred and bigotry that exists in our society. Following this incident, my family suggested that I leave the United States due to concern for my safety. They believed Canada would be a better, safer place to practice our religion. However, my subsequent experience revealed that Canada is not immune to Islamophobia. I'm deeply concerned about the drastic rise of Islamophobia and anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian racism across Canada. Let me be clear here. The hate my community is subjected to is not abstract. It manifests in many ways. On December 3rd, 2023, my fear became a stark reality. I was volunteering at a peace protest in my city of Victoria, exercising my right to free speech and assembly, and calling for a ceasefire, a cause I deeply believe in. And I hope this committee and the Canadian government realizes how important it is for Canada to stand for peace in the crisis in Gaza. As the day went on, I decided to renew my parking meter. On the way back, I noticed there was some commotion along the path that I had taken. I saw a man in a red car arguing with a protester. To my utter shock, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, the same individual who was in the vehicle arguing with a peace protester started accelerating towards me. The sight of the vehicle accelerating toward me was terrifying. My heart started pounding. My adrenaline surged through me. Thankfully, I managed to jump out of the way, avoiding serious injuries or perhaps even death. Following the incident, I was still shaken. I decided to attend an open office event held by Dean Murdoch, the mayor of the city of Saanich, BC, to voice my concern and seek reassurance that my incident should not happen again. Surprisingly, after the Mayor Murdoch was informed that I was the victim of the incident, he showed very little concern and did not express any word of empathy or reassurance to me. The lack of response and concern from our elected official was disheartening to me. It felt like my experience and the border of Islamophobia pattern were being ignored and did not matter to them. Around this time, I had to write my finals exams. The anxiety from the incident was overwhelming to me, so I reached out to my university department, explaining my situation and asking for exemption from taking my finals. The response was far from supportive. Throughout this ordeal, I received no support from the university. No one contacted me or checked on me, leaving me to navigate this stressful situation on my own. The trauma of that day has been etched into my mind. I experienced sudden flashback of what happened, and I cannot help it but live in constant fear. Every time I leave my house, I'm gripped by anxiety, wondering, could this happen to me again or to someone else just because they are exercising their freedom of speech? This whole experience had made me feel like I have lost my right to express the whole experience had made me feel like I have lost my right to express my beliefs freely and safely. The lack of support from our elected official and the university has only reinforced this feeling, leaving me to uncertain and feeling isolated. This incident is not an isolated one. It's a part of border pattern of violent Islamophobia and harassment that many Muslims in Canada face every day. The psychological toll of living with this fear is immense and impacts our daily lives. Hate and violence toward our community or any other community should not be tolerated. Today, I want to ask members of this committee to take strong action against Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism and to protect our civil liberties, the right to peaceful protest. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. We will continue now with Ali Islam for 5 minutes.
Good morning. I speak to you from London, Ontario, traditional home of the Anishinaabe people for over 13,000 years. This Thursday will be the third anniversary of the day my niece, Madiha Salman, her husband, Salman Afzal, her mother-in-law, Talat Afzal, her 15-year-old daughter, Yumna Afzal, and her 9-year-old son, Faiz Afzal, were deliberately attacked by a pickup truck driven by a young man, 3 generations erased with the aim of scaring Muslim Canadians into leaving Canada. The crime my family committed? Being visibly Muslim in public. An attack that was neither unspeakable nor unimaginable to happen here. For decades, Muslim Canadians have been deliberately portrayed as a fifth column. I'll repeat that. In a pervasive narrative, Muslim Canadians are being actively and intentionally portrayed as outsiders and foreigners, as the other. A depiction that continues and thrives, an intentional depiction that eventually has real, brutal, and deadly consequences. Which of you will say that the conditions that led up to June 6th no longer exist today? The perpetrator behind the attack on our London family took direct inspiration from 2 men, highlighting the international interconnectedness of ideological hatred. The first, the 2019 terrorist attack at a mosque in New Zealand, which left 51 dead. The second, a California attack, also in 2019, and inspired by the New Zealand Manifesto. This man tried to set a mosque on fire, and when that arson was thwarted by congregants who happened to be inside the mosque, the man escaped and shot 3 people in a synagogue instead. What this tells us is that hate is transferable. The innocence of all the children in my family vanished, especially my 9-year-old great-nephew, now an orphan, coming face to face with the most evil fruit of what is a socially acceptable and unchallenged othering, the end result of monolithic labeling of Muslims into the belief that deviant acts committed overseas are somehow the responsibility of individual Canadian Muslims to shoulder. The shameless othering of Muslims in daily life that doesn't even feel the need to hide its face. I told Faisal Zal that a criminal just a few years older than Yumna ran over everyone, leaving nobody alive. Not even one is what he asked. This is the price of Islamophobia that Faiz has to pay for the rest of his life. My youngest son thought, how could someone kill another person without knowing them? And even if someone hated a person, why would they kill them? In his sweet innocence, he thought if the criminal had taken the time to sit down for kebabs and a mango smoothie with our family, the criminal would have changed his mind. My son now wonders if his native Canada is really a safe place. Does his Muslim identity make him less Canadian? As Muslims, we pray 5 times during the day. And in the past, when my son had to pray in public, he would have no issue. But now, when he has to pray, he's conscious of people judging him, or worse, that someone will desire to hurt him. He wonders when he puts on his hockey jersey with the name Islam emblazoned on the back, what names or comments other parents may throw. He says he used to look at his home as a safe place. Canada is still my only home, he says, but now I'm not so sure how welcome or safe I feel. Age 13. My middle son, a teenager 1 year younger than Yumna, told me that hatred of Muslims has taught him that it's dangerous for a Muslim Canadian to feel attached to anything or anyone because nothing is guaranteed, not even tomorrow. Age 16. My daughter, my eldest child, just 2 years older than Yumna, lost her vivaciousness and sense of belonging. She fell into deep isolation, using it as a shield, in an environment that was telling her that Muslims do not belong. She says she didn't feel heard or valued by society. She has learned that striving for happiness is unrealistic. Instead, we should strive for peace. Age 18. For my wife, the effect of the violent expression of Islamophobia is that in her mind, she now says a final goodbye whenever me or the children walk out the door, every single day. It's exhausting for her, but this is her reality. She has lived through a war, seen and experienced violence overseas, but she never felt so vulnerable as she does now. She says perhaps it's because she felt lied to about Canada's diversity and promise of equality for everyone. She feels short-sighted for believing that this promise was for everyone. Since the attack, she has lost faith that society will give equal worth to its citizens. Is equal worth only for Canadians of European heritage? A young woman in my family who wears the hijab is scared about the what-ifs when she steps outside. The hijab, a sign of humility, a signal to others about her honesty and devotion, now makes her a walking bullseye. Not only does it put her in danger, it puts anyone alongside her in danger as well. So on top of carrying fear, she now has to carry guilt. As we approach the 3rd anniversary of the attack on our London family, let me read to you some of the comments sent in over the last few weeks to the volunteers and the City of London employees organizing the vigil on Thursday evening. Islamophobia is not a thing. When will the City of London stop sucking Islamic expletive? Stop pandering to a people who would sooner slit your throat than help you. People like you are the problem. What have Muslims done for us besides nothing? No sympathy. Stop terrorizing Jewish folks in Toronto. Piss on Islam. You will all be held accountable. We are coming for all of you. Keep London pure. As a family that's a victim of a hate crime, we feel there are unrealistic lack of resources and insufficient willpower to understand hate, to talk about how it develops, how it's propagated, and how it can be combated. Ask Parliament to do a better job at explaining why Islamophobia matters if it's only affecting 5% of the population. Is it real? Is it being exaggerated? Why should 95% of Canadians care about it? I ask parliamentarians to say what should be obvious. Is Canada ultimately a nation for the descendants of white Europeans, or is it something else? Listen to your conscience. Stop the intentional othering and dehumanization of Muslim Canadians. Look to your right and left when you sit in the House and call out your colleagues. We are Canadian. Pass or amend the online harms bill to protect our youth, but get it passed. And I've seen foot dragging on the provincial level with no passage of the Our London Family Act, the act that includes proposed changes to education and creating safe zones around religious institutions. There's a Senate report on Islamophobia that came out in November 2023. Will this committee be taking that off the shelf?
So,
I
Mr.
saw that, Madam
Islam,
Chair.
I'll step you. No, it's okay. I've given you a bit of time extra due to the fact that we have one panel today of witnesses, and but we'll come back to you at the round of questionings. We will now go to Director General Shafni Nalir, Center of Islamic and Community Services of Toronto.
Good morning, Madam Chair and honorable members. Thank you for the invitation to appear before this committee study on Islamophobia. My name is Shafi Nalir. I grew up in Toronto, where I currently live with my wife and 4 children. I immigrated with my parents fleeing the civil war and religious persecution in Sri Lanka. I grew up going to the Bond Street Nursery School that was operated by the Metropolitan United Church. I grew up like most Canadians of my age group, 50-cent freezies, saving up pennies to buy candy from the corner store, and watching The Elephant Show with Sharon, Lois, and Bram. However, unlike most Canadians, I can brag that I saw them live, twice. Growing up as a visible minority, you learn to have thick skin. Don't disrupt the peace. Stay quiet and absorb the offhanded insults, sarcastic comments, and the occasional physical bullying. Up until recently, I stopped seeing myself as a grateful guest in Canada and realized that I am in fact a host and hope to be a gracious one. Canada is as much my country as any other Canadians. Now I want to share our community's experience with Islamophobia and hate-motivated violence targeting our places of worship. I'm the General Manager at the Toronto Islamic Centre and Community Services, the first and only mosque on Yonge Street and the only mosque in the University Rosedale riding. On October 10th, 2020, our mosque received a threatening email by an individual claiming to be associated with the Jewish Defense League, the JDL, a listed terrorist organization by the FBI. Some of the content of the threatening email included, and I quote, "We will kill every Muzzi. We have the guns to do Christchurch all over again." We reported this threat to local law enforcement, and they advised us to close the mosque for a few days as they assess the threat. For 4 long weeks, our mosque was closed to the public and to our congregants. There was fear and panic amongst our congregants. I want to remind this committee that our community lives with the trauma of the Quebec City mosque terrorist attack that took the lives of 6 worshippers in January of 2017. During this time, my family was concerned for my safety and would often discourage me from going to our mosque to do any administrative work for fear that I would not return home. Since that incident, we've had several hate-motivated graffiti at our mosque and the occasional banging on our doors and windows while we were inside praying. However, on November 18th, 2023, threats to our mosque turned into action. At around 6:30 in the morning, just after the morning prayer, I, along with around 50 congregants, including small children, heard several loud bangs on the window and doors of our mosque. A few congregants and I rushed outside to see what occurred, only to be met with an individual on a bike hurling racist threats at us saying, and I quote, "You effing Arabs, you effing Muslims, we're going to finish you all." Then this individual spat several times in our direction and rode off. I went inside to call the police to report what happened. Shortly after, this individual returned and threw a large rock at a group of congregants who were socializing in front of the mosque. Thankfully, he narrowly missed our elderly caretaker of the mosque by a few inches. He then yelled, "You're all dead," and sped off once again. I and a few congregants chased him down and managed to corner him. Thankfully, at the same time, a traffic officer happened to be in the area that helped control the situation. Police would shortly arrive on the scene. After the officers learned what happened, they proceeded to arrest him. I felt a huge sigh of relief. Later that evening, the Toronto police released a statement, and we learned that this individual also committed several other offenses a few days prior and had also attacked 2 other individuals because of their faith. He was charged with a total of 14 charges. Since that day, I cannot fully focus on my prayer in the mosque because I'm always thinking about who will walk in and how I will respond to protect my community members. Every time I hear the door open, my whole body tenses up because I fear for the worst. My children grew up at this mosque. In fact, my youngest son took his first steps in this mosque. My wife and I, along with many other parents, consider our mosque as a safe space for children to roam freely without parents feeling the need to worry. This individual robbed our community's sense of safety at our mosque, which is the foundation of our community. I admit, we were afraid. We were afraid, but not deterred. We still pray in congregation, but have increased our annual security budget from $4,800 a year to $36,000 per year. Our budget includes 24-hour monitoring and recordings and active shooter drills and training for our congregants. Nowadays, we always have worshipers standing guard while others pray. Today, I want to ask this committee to take action against Islamophobia and violence that our communities are facing and to ensure our government provides protection for our places of worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Youth Coalition Combating Islamophobia. And I understand that Mariam Al-Sabawi will be presenting on behalf of the group, and then we have two others that will be available to respond to questions. And I will be lenient with my time because I understand you thought you had a little bit more extra, so that'll be, we'll do our best. So, Ms. Al-Sabawi, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariam Al-Sabawi, and I am a grade 12 student. Yumna was my close friend. Yumna and I have been in the same class since the second grade. In high school, we joined the International Baccalaureate program together and shared almost every class. We ran for student council as a duo. We planned to start a business together whose profits we agreed would be donated to charity. We planned to go to university together. We often spoke of our futures, our hopes, and our dreams, like most young kids do. Yumna was more than a friend to me. She was a confidant, a support system, a study partner, a secret keeper, a giver of hope. And most importantly, she was a constant reminder that good friends do exist. I miss Yumna. Not a day passes that I don't think of her. I miss her laughter, her smile, her kindness, and her sense of humor. If only we could press rewind. This is what I do each night. Rewind the memories, rewind the sound of her laughter, rewind the endless text messages, rewind the conversations that so deeply connected me to her. I even rewind June 6, 2021. That's when I wish I could have pressed pause, but I can't. The thought of my friend being targeted, hunted in the streets, mowed down, and killed just because of her Muslim faith was very debilitating, especially as a 14-year-old Muslim girl. Can you imagine how difficult it has been to process what happened? Can you imagine the difficulty of simply existing, feeling safe, or trying to move on? 3 years have passed and parts of me have gone with it. Losing Yumna has left a gaping hole in me. There aren't enough words in the dictionary to describe how difficult these past few years have been. I have been consumed by the thought of what she used to be, what she could have been, and what she is. Night after night, I've awoken to the same dream. Yumna being run over as she walks home with her family. I wake up in sweats thinking, don't worry, Mariam, it's only a dream. But it's not. The grief is overwhelming. So much so that at times I'm no longer recognizable to those who love me. And at times, not even recognizable to myself. I'm not the same. None of us are. But how could we be? Most 14-year-olds don't have to worry about burying their friend and then having to figure out how to make sure they don't have to bury any others. I never imagined that the most formative years of my life, my teens, would be spent fighting hate and Islamophobia so that others would not experience the pain that my friends and I had to experience. The world placed a responsibility on our shoulders that would have crushed a mountain, but we had to carry it because others haven't. We had to carry it so that no one else would feel the pain that we have felt. We had to carry it because if we didn't, it seems as though no one else would. Sleepless nights, fear of trucks, and an inability to go for walks has caused me to reflect on what was actually taken from us on June 6, 2021. We didn't just lose Yumna and her beautiful family, but we lost our sense of belonging, our sense of community, our sense of safety, our sense of self. We even lost our innocence. The world isn't as kind as we had believed it to be. All of it taken because of hate that was left unchecked. Hate that was given endless opportunities to grow. Hate that was carefully incubated through the silence of others. I often think of Yumna's last moments. I often imagine her lying alone, wondering if she was afraid, if she felt pain, if she knew that death was imminent. These thoughts keep me up at night. And just when my mother had finally convinced me that she died on impact, I learned at the trial that her eyes were open, that she was foaming at the mouth, and that perhaps she was trying to speak. I wonder what she wanted to say. I wonder what her message to you would be. I wonder how many others have to die. Once again, I feel paralyzed, moving through motions, struggling to exist, struggling to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. But I'm exhausted. My family is exhausted. My friends are exhausted. My community is exhausted. We cannot even grieve in peace. He took from us what did not belong to him, and there is no way to give it back. The grief is overwhelming, and we have been forced to carry the weight of that grief. That grief hurts, it stings, it burns, it shatters, it crushes, and it can even kill. It has robbed us of our dreams, our hopes, our peace, and even our sense of self. That grief has been the greatest equalizer in our community, as no one has been able to escape it. It is our hope that our government will stop using language that dehumanizes us, whether it's referring to Muslims here or Muslims abroad. It is the continuous dehumanization of Muslims that enables others to justify our killing and enables the violent Islamophobia we continue to experience in our schools, in our streets, and in our communities. It is our hope that our government, on all levels, will recognize the importance of education in addressing hate towards Muslims, and will use education as a tool to combat this hate. It is our hope that our government will put politics aside and put people first. Thank you. I'm also going to have to leave because I have a class, but my friends Hamza and Doreen from YCCI will be answering questions on behalf of YCCI. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I was advised ahead of time. And before you go, let me just, before we start the questioning, just thank all of you before you leave for coming today and your bravery that you have shown to appear on this committee and give your heartfelt remarks. And we deeply appreciate that. And our condolences to you and all the family for all the loss that you have suffered. We will now begin with our questioning. And we will go for 6-minute rounds. And we will start for Member of Parliament, Mr. Moore.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses, including Miriam, who's just left for her class, but for powerful testimony and for turning the pain and personal loss that you've experienced into trying to solve some of the problems of today and hopefully improve the situation here in Canada. I wanted to ask Dr. Islam a question. Number one, sir, thank you for your powerful testimony. You've suffered personal loss, and we appreciate your perspective on this. My question is about, I noted in an article I read that cited you that you don't use the name of the perpetrator that took the lives of your family members. And likewise, with the Quebec City mosque shootings where 6 individuals were killed, I won't use the perpetrator's name, but I want to I wanted to ask you a question about that. The law had been changed previously so that in cases, and they're fortunately rare cases, but in cases when it happens in Canada of mass murder, multiple murder, that individuals who perpetrate these heinous crimes, that there not be sentencing discount, so to speak, for the fact that someone took more than one life, and that they would get consecutive life sentences. So previous to the change in law, if someone, we heard recently of a story of Paul Bernardo. If someone took multiple lives, they could only get one period of parole ineligibility, which is 25 years. So in the subsequent to the change that was brought in, an individual like the individual that shot 3 RCMP officers in Moncton could receive consecutive periods of parole ineligibility. That person received, instead of a 25-year sentence, a 75-year sentence. And we heard from victims' families, the widow of one of the victims of one of these crimes, who said, while this doesn't bring back my loved one, I do take solace in that my daughter will not have to attend parole hearings every 2 years to try to keep this individual behind bars. So as you are probably well aware, the Supreme Court of Canada a few years ago struck down this law around consecutive periods of parole ineligibility, and there was some strong commentary afterwards. I know the president of the Islamic Cultural Center, where the shooting took place, expressed disappointment with the court's decision. A quote from him: "In our view, this decision fails to take into due consideration the atrocity, the scourge of the multiple murders which were multiplying in North America, as well as the hateful Islamophobic and racist aspect of this crime. Our deep concern is about the orphans that will see the murderer in the roads of Quebec City 25 years after this tragedy," he said. So I'll ask you, sir, do you feel that we as a parliament, or that the government should take some strides to respond to this court decision?
Well, Mr. Moore, the way I understand it, the sentencing and the court system falls under the purview of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, where the parole system, as it is, falls under the purview of the Minister of Public Safety. There are probably some good reasons of making this separation. But personally, I don't think that this is working properly for Canadians, particularly the Canadians who are victims of hate crime or have been the victims of, let's say, a mass murder or serial killer. The mandate for the public safety minister and the parole system seems to be rehabilitation, and it seems to be weighted very heavily towards rehabilitation without giving proper weightage to deterrence. So maybe there was a formula at some time that worked, but the formula isn't working now. I think that the one easy solution for making sure that people who have committed the most heinous of crimes, terrorizing Canadians, stay in prison, and that lies with the parole system and making sure that they stay in. So whether one is rehabilitated or not, weigh the other variables that were behind the circumstances of the crime. Weigh all the other victims. With hate crimes, the victims aren't just the immediate family and the people who died. It's everyone else who was affected.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor, for your response. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Ms. Zahid, please, Member of Parliament Zahid, for 6 minutes.
My first question is for Umar Babili. First of all, I'm happy that you are safe today and that the incident involving you did not turn fatal. A simple question for you. Do you believe that the person that attacked you did so because you were Muslim? What do you believe drove him to take such violent and despicable measures to go out and try to ram someone with their car that was visibly Muslim?
Thank you for your question. There are multiple factors that came in this. So First of all, I think what agitated him was we protesting for Palestine that day. But I can say there's Islamophobia in it as well, because after the incident happened and the police arrested him, he was saying racist comments to the other protester who was arguing with him earlier. Like, for example, go back to your country, or other racist comments as well. So it's both. It's about Islam and about us protesting for Palestine that day that agitated him towards doing what he did to me. Thank you.
My next question is, do you feel that your university has stood by your side in this horrible incident? Do you feel that they are protecting you and the other Muslim students on the campus? So if you can explain a bit.
Thank you. I don't feel after the accident happened, no one reached out to me from my university, nor the department of the university, even though I contacted them. I explained to them my situation of what happened, but it seems like they did not care of what happened to me. No one reached out to me. I had to go through my exams. It was very stressful for me to go through. I had 4 exams and they were finals, very hard subjects, but I had to navigate this on my own. They did not reach out to me or show any concern.
Thank you. My next question is for Ali Islam. Mr. Islam, first of all, I'm so sorry for the loss of your family members in an Islamophobic act of terrorism. Do you feel that justice was served through the court process? Or do you feel the same environment of hate and Islamophobia that led to this tragic act of terror still exists in Canada today?
I think the justice system did what it could under the limits it's operating under. And there are constraints, and I'll explain some of them. Even what I know about the committee is interested in learning about Islamophobia. Islamophobia is not one disease entity. There are many different types, and it has many different manifestations. The most benign form, if we can look at it from a disease model, is born from ignorance about Muslims. And there's a sly and sinister form born from, let's say, geopolitics, where anti-Muslim hatred is used as a justification to keep Muslim voices out of the top spheres of power and influence. And that's intentional. There's a form of Islamophobia that comes from the far left, and there's a form of Islamophobia born from white nationalism. And that type goes hand in hand with anti-Semitism, misogyny, anti-Black racism, anti-LGBT. So there are many different paths to the same end result. And what we don't understand, I think, is how when Islamophobia goes up in one of these categories, how it affects the other. This is where I think where governments, parliament, and academics can add value. And if you don't look at all the different building blocks of hate, I don't think you're going to get to some of the root causes behind the hatred that does exist. There's another element which really is trying to catch up to the times. The way that hatred was spread in the past is very different than it is now. And the technology companies have a large role to play because they're not simple conduits of information. There's a way of getting radicalized and falling into echo chambers and filter bubbles that happens online. And that's another big piece that we have to catch up on. And simple fact checking isn't enough to keep people falling into circles of hate. Source checking needs to be a big variable in how we look at how hate is spread. Because I don't think we're doing a good job right now.
Thank you. Quick question. You mentioned in your testimony also about hate being transferred. And the second aspect which you touched on is about your son mentioning to learn about your neighbors. You mentioned to CBC also that people should take the time to get to know their neighbors. and people who are different than them. So how can we encourage that at the community level, and what can we as public leaders do in that?
If I go back to some of the building blocks of Islamophobia, that's the most benign form of Islamophobia, just general unexposure or ignorance to Muslims. Maybe you've never actually come across a Muslim in your life. There are large parts of Canada where that's certainly possible. Yes, telling more Muslim stories, having more Muslim voices, that would be one method of doing it. But when you go back to the role of government and parliament, I think Parliament has to figure out how to tell Canadians, the 95% of Canadians who are not Muslim, why it's important to combat anti-Islamophobia and other forms of hatred, right? If it doesn't affect the majority, how is protection of the minority better for the whole country?
Thank you, Dr. Islam. We will now move to Monsieur Fortin pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Fortin, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'd like to thank you all for coming this morning. Your testimony is very important. As far as I'm concerned, I have learned a lot. I learned so much during our hearings on anti-Semitism, and I'm listening closely to you this morning, and I'm learning so much. And I don't think that learning has come to an end. I think, as Dr. Islam just said, we don't know enough. We don't know enough about the Muslim faith. And perhaps it would be appropriate to become more familiar with the precepts of your religion. That being said, of course, we would all like to be able to live safely. We would like our streets to be safe, and we would like for everyone to be able to practice the religion of their choice freely and without fear of persecution. These days at the Justice Committee, we've been studying anti-Semitism, and now we're looking at Islamophobia. So, Dr. Islam, I'd like to hear you speak to this. Do you think that we should be treating all forms of discrimination in the same way? For example, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism that you were referring to earlier, whether it's founded on the color of one's skin, whether it's grounded on sexual orientation. There are these forms of discrimination that are harmful to a safe climate in Canada and Quebec. So in your opinion, do you feel these various forms of discrimination should be treated in the same way, or are there different characteristics that present different challenges that we should be focusing on, and for example, in Islamophobia?
Dr. Islam?
Dr. Islam, that question was for you.
Est-ce qu'il entend, Madame la
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Dr. Islam, I don't know if you heard the question that Mr. Fortin is asking, and he's asking for you by the way, I've stopped the time. J'ai arrêté le temps. Alors,
I did stop your time. I'm just going to explain. I think perhaps he's on mute.
Phone is on, so... but were you able to hear Mr. Fortin's question in French? And that he was addressing it to you?
French.
You did?
I was able to hear it in French,
yes.
But my French is grade 11, and it's been a while.
Oh, no, but did you put the interpretation on the machine? You were trying to understand the French. Okay, I get it.
Yes.
So
no,
on your
not.
we're gonna suspend for a minute. We're gonna give you a call. Whoever on the screen is not able to put it on French so that you can. How do you put it? Mr. Clerk, can you explain? The clerk will explain.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If you go below on the lower part of your screen, you got an interpretation button, so you can push it and select the language of your choice there. Do you all see it? Okay, so you can select it.
Yes, I see it now.
Okay, thank you.
So I am going to roll it back a little bit, Monsieur Fortin. Je veux vous donner...
Mr. Fortin, I'm going to give you your time again. And could you put your question again, please? Perhaps summarize it. Well, I'd like to know first if all the witnesses can hear the interpretation when I'm speaking in French. Can you all hear the English?
Oui.
Vous êtes certaine?
You're certain, Madam Chair? Because you'll understand why I want to make sure that I'm being understood.
Mr. Fortin has this happen to him quite a bit. And so it would be nice in the remarks that you make at the beginning of the meeting to include directions on how to make sure you have the interpretation button on so that Mr. Fortin doesn't have to continually experience this. Thank you.
Alors, je vais...
So I'm going to start over, and my time is being set back to 0, right, Madam Chair? Yes? Okay. Yes, please go ahead and repeat your question. So thank you, Madam Chair. So as I was saying, I was thanking all the witnesses for being with us here today because anti-Semitism has been before the committee. It's been a major concern and in Canada and in Quebec. And I am so pleased that I'm learning so much more now about Islamophobia, about the lives of Muslims in Canada through your testimony. We've just concluded a study on anti-Semitism. I learned so much about the Jewish faith and the various challenges that the Jewish communities face in Canada. And now I'm learning this morning about the challenges that you face. And so this is very precious information that you've brought to us. Now, I was asking a question of Dr. Islam. I've heard the testimony to date, and from what I understand, there is fear. Ms. Al-Sabawi was speaking to us about that, fear of walking in the street, going to school, being in public spaces. And you also have referred to the kinds of fears being experienced. My question is this. Do you think that these various forms of discrimination should be addressed in the same way? That is, the challenges of Islamophobia versus racism versus discrimination based on gender or skin color versus discrimination against LGBTQ communities. Should all these forms of discrimination be addressed in the same way, or are there different challenges that therefore need to be addressed with different solutions? Dr. Islam, could you please start with an answer?
Okay, yes. All the forms of hatred that you mentioned absolutely deserve addressing, each and every single one. There is some overlap. So where there is overlap, there are some common solutions that would work to address that, whatever are some of the similarities. I mentioned that one of the forms of Islamophobia comes from white supremacism, a belief in the Great Replacement theory. And the Islamophobia that comes from that, it goes hand in hand with anti-Semitism. And I quoted to one of the inspirations behind the perpetrator of my family's killing. He was inspired by New Zealand. He was inspired by California, and the terrorist in California who wasn't able to set fire to a mosque went and shot people in a synagogue. And there certainly is a chain that you can draw of killers. Even Buffalo, New York, which happened in 2022, El Paso, Texas, Pittsburgh synagogue. The Great Replacement theory and the I guess the echo chambers that people fall into and go down a rabbit hole, that's a real thing. And so addressing that would address many types of hate at the same time, but it wouldn't be a complete solution.
Merci, Dr. Islam.
Thank you. So from your perspective, do you think there's something that could be done that could meet the needs of Muslim and Jewish communities in Canada. Now, I'm not talking about the conflicts abroad that we are all distressed over, but I'm talking about here in Canada and Quebec. Is there something that could be done that would actually lead to improvements for the Muslim communities and Jewish communities?
So this is where the tech companies and the media companies bear responsibility. So communication is not just the transmission of a fact from one person to another. It's the transmission of ideas and stories. And any idea, if it's a link to an emotion, if that message evokes fear or anger or a sense of injustice, it will trump any communication that tries to be factual. And the creators of hate speech, they'll use memes and sarcasm and humor and rhetoric to appeal to adolescents and to young people. And the more time people spend online...
Dr. Islam, je veux pas être...
Thank you. I don't want to be impolite, but I only have 1 minute left. So I'd also like to hear from Mr. Babili on this. Do you think there's something that could be done that would address the needs of the Jewish communities and Muslim communities, both?
Vous êtes sur silence, Monsieur Baby.
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you. So as Islam said, this is where the media takes part of this. Sharing awareness is what will help both Muslim and Jewish community, right? So we have to share awareness of Islamic beliefs, Jewish belief, and sharing awareness among Canadians here. I think this will make people understand what Islam is about, what Judaism is about, and here we can come to one solution to reduce hate towards both religion here in Canada.
Merci. Peut-être en quelques secondes.
Thank you. Perhaps in a few seconds, perhaps one of the students replacing Ms. Al-Sabawi could also respond.
Okay, why don't we will now go to... we'll come back to the other ones later, but we will now go for 6 minutes to Mr. Garrison.
Madame la Présidente, avec votre permission, je sais.
Madam Chair, just a quick comment. I saw that one of the students was actually speaking, but we couldn't hear them. Could you perhaps just provide a reminder through the clerk the way that they can activate their mics so that time isn't lost trying to do that?
Is there anybody does not know how to put the microphone on to speak? I think you were all tested and the microphones are all working, correct? So when you want to speak, just unmute yourselves. Thank you. Mr. Garrison, we will now go to you for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I do want to start by expressing my condolences to the families who've lost loved ones, and also my thanks to the witnesses. And I do agree with the Chair for the bravery of being here today. And I want to say that I know all members of the committee will want to know of any consequences of your appearance today. I've heard from one of the witnesses who appeared in our anti-Semitism study of an attempt to retaliate for their appearance at the committee. And we will be taking measures to make sure that that is followed up. So certainly we will care very much and be very vigilant about any attempts to intimidate people who appear before our committee. Your powerful testimony today illustrates what I hoped we would achieve. When we started with the idea of studying anti-Semitism, I believed we should also study Islamophobia, not necessarily because they always go hand in hand, but because these are two of the most virulent forms of hatred presently in our society. And what you have said to us today about the loss of sense of belonging, the loss of sense of safety, is very, very powerful and something that Parliament really must address. So I want to ask Mr. Nalir from the Centre of Islamic and Community Services of Toronto what he feels has been most effective in helping restore a sense of security, or if that's been possible, and what would be most helpful in trying to restore that sense of security for the members of his mosque.
Thank you for the question. Engagement with law enforcement, having them present has put a Band-Aid over the wound, and it has helped. We're seeing more engagement than before. Definitely the different programs that do exist, whether the SIP program, that the government has put out has helped. However, actually getting approved and applying for the program is extremely difficult. I hear this from many mosques in our communities, that the program is a wonderful program as long as you can get into it. Even myself, when we applied for the program, we had to make a little bit of noise before we actually got approved. And so this would be something. So yeah, I'd say more engagement with law enforcement. The other thing as well is when we did call the police, it took them quite a while to respond. I wonder if when places of worship, when they do call police, I wonder, or if like institutions that have many people that they're responsible for, maybe there's perhaps something that can be done to have a quicker response time. That'd be helpful.
And in terms of within the community, have you been able to marshal resources for those who maybe feel most affected by these things? And are there ways that programs could be developed to help the resilience of the community at the mosque respond?
There are different programs, but to be honest, we just raise it amongst ourselves. It's too much work to apply for government grants and things like that. We're talking about the safety of people, the well-being of people, the trauma that people are going through. We have no time to sit and wait and apply for applications and hear a response and this and that, and just being told no too many times is just, we rather just, like, it's unfortunate, but we rather just protect ourselves in terms of trying to raise money. We have little kids selling cookies to raise money to pay for our security guard. Like, that's the reality at our mosque and many other mosques, I think.
And I think certainly all members of our committee would thank you for the work that you are doing in your own community. I want to ask a similar question to the Youth Coalition Combating Islamophobia. In the work that you're doing as youth, can you tell me what you're finding that's most effective and most helpful in combating Islamophobia?
I find that our main sort of focus as YCCI has been from an education and awareness aspect. We have seen a lot from that. However, unfortunately, what remains is the fact that these same youth, again, me included, are still having to deal with the reality of the situation, like Brother Shafni was saying, with the fact that ultimately what we can accomplish in our numbers is only so much when the institutions that we are living with and the governments that we are living with are using rhetoric that is every day pushing the line further and further and further back. And ultimately, there's only so much we can educate while there's so much of that education trying to be reversed by these institutions, the rhetoric that they're using, by the government and the rhetoric that it's using.
Thank you for that. Dr. Islam, I have heard from a number of people suggesting that what we need are community forums to talk about the importance of combating Islamophobia and other forms of hatred. Do you see that community forums, perhaps financed by the federal government, might be an effective tool?
No. The messages the government has sent on this, I don't think are convincing. I keep hearing diversity is our strength. It's a mantra. It doesn't carry any meaning for me. Why is it our strength? How has government shown that it's our strength? If you don't have an answer to that, I don't think people are going to believe it at face value when you say it. The protection of any minority, not just Muslims, it has to be conveyed by the government. I think it's the government's job to do a much better job of saying this is how we protect the most vulnerable or marginalized communities, and this is why we should be doing it. I don't think putting out more facts is going to sway people who think otherwise. There has to be a much more compelling reason for bringing all Canadians together, and that's the government's job to do. The otherization or the othering of minorities, it happens, as Hamza just alluded to. It's happening at the institutional level, and that could be from people who, for political reasons, want to make Muslims the other. That has to be addressed. Parliamentary committees have played a role in this. So I know, particularly after the 9/11 era, individuals and organizations asked to speak at parliamentary committees. They're pulled in from organizations and think tanks that are funded by private donors and private family foundations, not supported by the general Muslim populace or scholars at reputable universities. So if you invite pseudo scholars or partisan ex-Muslims to testify at Parliament, you're playing a role in the othering, and that's not right. So House and Senate committees need to start an executive task of source checking and not just fact checking, because fact checking in the modern era doesn't work.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Islam. As you can all appreciate, I'm being very flexible with the time, particularly with the responses that the witnesses are giving, given the fact that we only have one panel today. I'm able to do that, otherwise I would not be able to. We will now go to our second round. For 5 minutes, please, to MP Ziad Al Abu Taif.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for including me today on this important issue. Omar, Ali, Shafni, Hamza, and Mariam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the committee. I'm sorry about hearing all these factual stories about what happened, about the suffering, and especially in Canada, of course, it's hurting to hear that we still have to deal with these issues, although we believe that we live in a world that is different than what we've experienced maybe in the past decades. There's no lack of evidence. There is no lack of incidents over what's happening. I think there's a lack of action. So, Dr. Islam, you've mentioned a few things. You said the government message is not efficient. You believe that there is still things not being acted upon as far as how to tackle and to deal. You've examined you call it the disease, and then you mentioned there's many types of Islamophobia, which is we realize. So it could be regional, could be ethnic, could be on a religion base or sect. It could be any type or form. So we are up to a big challenge. I know that the Muslim community is not alone. There's anti-Semitism on the rise in the country too. So the question to you, Dr. Islam, is what is the action plan? We need a short-term plan, and we need long-term solutions in this work in progress that we're faced with. So how do you see it from you're a community representative, and you've attached to a family that went through this hardship. So how do you see the solution? How can everybody work together? Is there a plan in your mind, and in a community mind, do you think that really can put things in perspective to help tackle this issue?
It's a great question, Ziad. Obviously, it'll take people from many disciplines to do it. It's not just government. It won't just be community leaders. The role of education here is not something to be overlooked. We may tend to pass it off as being a provincial responsibility, but I think for the sake of national unity and cohesion, the education system cannot be overlooked here. One of the drivers of hate is also one of the drivers of polarization. So, generally speaking, no matter where you look, polarization has increased over time. And the sort of the middle is sort of drying up. People are going one way or the other, and everyone is moving apart. And it can be on a variety of issues. It could be on climate change. It could be on vaccines. It could be on anything. And this is where the study of polarization has to overlap with the study of hatred. So it'll take many disciplines to come together. One of the realities is that we don't get information anymore from benign conduits. We're being fed more and more information of what we like. And if you interact with it, forward it, comment on it, the algorithms assume that you like it. You're going to get more and more and more and more. And the tech companies know this and they take advantage of it. This is something that serves their purposes. They don't have a duty to be responsible citizens. And I think this is creating a wedge in society. So, the answer is very, very complex. And as I said earlier, the messaging to the public has to be very effective. Has to appeal to emotion, not just fact-based. And if we start with the education system to sort of inoculate people against different types of echo chambers, to inoculate people against logical fallacies and sort of mental traps, that can start at a very young age. This goes beyond teaching math and spelling. This goes to the heart of logic. And if we start in the elementary school system, I think we're going to be better off as a populace.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now go for 5 minutes to Member of Parliament Zubiri, please. Samir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here, and to all members for studying this important matter. This is a very apt conversation. We're having many important conversations around anti-Semitism. Now is Pride Month, and our government does address all forms of discrimination, be it anti-Black, be it other forms that do exist within society. But this is an extremely important study, and I want to thank the witnesses, especially those who have gone through personal tragedy, for your strength and for your courage, and hope that your healing process is moving ahead. I want to start off with Mr. Nalhir, and I only have about 4.5 minutes, so I'm asking for concise answers. But Mr. Nalhir, you mentioned about how the security of institutions, of places of worship, but also community institutions. I just want to ask, first off, are you aware of the Security Infrastructure Program? And if so, and I'm hoping you'll say yes, if you are aware, do you find it hard to access? Just a simple answer on those fronts.
Yes, I'm aware. It's easy to access, but hard to finally put the application through.
What I hear is that it's you're aware of it. It's in effect hard to access because it's hard to put the application together. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm assuming you would want ease and facilitation, some help in putting that package together. Would that help you to secure your institutions and, to your knowledge, other institutions be better secured into the future?
Yes, anyone in an emergency should be given a liaison for the application.
Thank you so much. The liaison idea is a great idea. I'd like to move on now to Mr. Ali Islam. And you referenced a really important piece of legislation, Bill C-63, which is the Online Harms Act. And myself, I'm quite preoccupied about the online space. I notice on my own social media when I post on certain issues, I have a lot of trolling. I don't know if they're trolls in particular or bot farms, but I do have a lot of trolling that's happening. And a lot of it's hateful. And I can't actually delete the middle fingers. I can't delete the hateful comments towards other identifiable groups. I'm wondering if you think that, from your knowledge, to Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, if that will help address this issue of misinformation, bots, and hate that's being spewed online.
I know what about Bill C-63, what I've heard through the media. I haven't read the bill myself.
To your general knowledge and succinctly, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so to my general knowledge, this is a very positive development, and it's something that's overdue. The online space is really a wild west, and I fully expect to, and maybe every member of this panel will get comments through social media about our appearance here today. I typically would expect to get comments about, go back where you came from, or, you should be lucky that you're here.
Yeah. So I
expect
appreciate
to get all those types of
I
comments.
appreciate that. So would you say do you have a fair amount of knowledge when it comes to this Online Harms Act? A fair amount of knowledge, in the sense of you read as a layperson, you've been following it in the media.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
And to your knowledge as a layperson following it in the media, though, would you say that this Online Harms Act would help address the concerns being brought forth to this committee and other forms of discrimination?
Yes. In short, I know.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
The bullying. Yeah. Okay. I was going to mention that the bullying and protection of young people is addressed in the Act. There's a concern about balancing the rights of free speech with the type of comments
which
that
are
people
important
make online.
balancing acts, certainly, and that's
Yes.
really important. I personally promote the protection of civil liberties and free expression. This is both principles are important. Addressing discrimination squarely and balancing is important. In the next 30 seconds, which remain, I want to open it up to whoever can answer in about 20 seconds. Over the last 7 months, have you found that discrimination has manifested differently over the last 7 months as it relates to Islamophobia in your own personal experience, in particular around expressions of freedom of speech, be it on rights of Palestinian people? Please. Maybe Mr. Ali, Ms. Ali Islam.
I think actually I'll let some of the university students comment about this.
I can touch on that really quickly, and I think the short answer is absolutely. Being a student on campus and just being a passerby as a community member in London, Ontario, we have seen the incredible spike in confidence in carrying out hate crimes or verbal assault. I have been a victim. Almost everyone that I love that is visibly Muslim has been a victim to these verbal assaults.
Do you think anti-Palestinian racism?
harassment.
Do you think anti-Palestinian racism should be part of government strategy?
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. We will now go to 2.5 minutes each. Mr. Fortin, first.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I believe we're in the second hour now, so I thought we were going to have 6 minutes each again, Madam Chair. I'm going to continue with the plan I have before me. Yes, I understand that you have a plan, Madam Chair, but I had a first round of 6 minutes. So now I'm going to only get 2.5 minutes right up to the end?
Malheureusement.
Unfortunately, we are still in the first round. We haven't finished the first round yet. Yes, but Madam Chair, at the start of the meeting, I asked the question. I had discussions with Mr. Housefather, who suggested the one panel as you did. And the problem with that is that with any of the Bloc or NDP members, we lose then 4 minutes on every round. So what we were going to do was reset in terms of speaking turns.
5 minutes each then to Mr. Fortin and Mr. Garrison.
Mieux, mais la prochaine fois.
Well, you know, I don't necessarily want to argue with you, but I will be objecting the next time this is raised if our turns are reduced.
No, I mean, not to belabor, because we would be delaying hearing from our witnesses, but we have agreed to a format for questions in this committee. Like Mr. Fortin's on his second question. Some of our members haven't had one question yet. So I think we should just stick with the format that we agreed to at the start of the committee, which provides for this exact scenario.
En tout respect, Madame.
Respectfully, Madam Chair, I do not believe there was an agreement on that format. That is to say, what you said we'd be doing. And what is provided for under our rules are 2 rounds of 1 hour each, 2 panels of 1 hour each. But, Madam Chair, I don't want to spend an hour arguing this. I will accept the 5 minutes. However, I do believe that after a first hour, there is supposed to be a reset for speaking length.
Monsieur Fortin, on applique.
Mr. Fortin, we are applying the same scenario that we have